A construction project causing headaches for drivers. It's the redesign of the intersection at St. Paul and Maple Streets. Some of you have reached out to us saying it is hard to navigate and it's causing damage to your cars.
Now, this isn't the first intersection the city's been redesigning. You're looking at the recent rebuild at Main and Champlain Streets. But this latest project at Maple and St. Paul is driving people mad.
Celine McArthur is investigating your concerns and joins us live in downtown Burlington. Celine, what's the issue here?
Well, Kat, Darren, this four-way intersection was designed with these bump outs to provide more room for people walking and hiking in the area, for trees and for rain gardens like this one to keep storm runoff off Lake Champlain. But the space for these added features, it had to come from somewhere, right? It came from the road. The streets here are more narrow and for some drivers harder to navigate. And they say these granite curbs are tearing up their tires. Look, you can see the marks left behind from cars hitting them. Now, city leaders tell me this is the new norm in Burlington and you need to get used to it. But do you?
Construction is almost done at the intersection of Maple and St. Paul Streets, and Mayor Merle Weinberger is clearly excited.
I think in the months and years to come, people are going to think of this as one of the really great streets in Burlington.
Jacob Hinsdale manages the apartment building on the corner and says these upgrades will make his units more appealing to prospective tenants.
I think quite literally the curb appeal is going up because granite curbs, and I think that people will be more happy living here. We're definitely getting a huge upgrade for pedestrians.
That's because the bump out design forces drivers to slow down.
That edge friction is what you call that nervous feeling you get when you go around a bulb at the end of a sidewalk, and that nervousness makes you a safer driver in the end, as irritating as it can be.
But some drivers say the design is unnecessary.
How slower can you get when it's a four-way stop? They're just basically telling motorists to stay home.
We sent up the SkyMax 3 drone to give you a clearer picture of what Steve is talking about. As you can see, this bus can't turn without going into the opposite lane of traffic.
That way sucks. Yeah, and then there's that.
Dennis Ilori lives right up the road and says the design aimed at protecting pedestrians is putting them in greater danger.
By the time they look at everybody else and they're bouncing off the curb, they don't have time to look for people.
Mike Burnett works at Gastro Grub on the southwest corner of the intersection. He says he lost count of how many cars nailed the curb.
I see it pretty much every day. Sometimes cars pull up at the same time and someone has to back up, especially if it's a bus, and they keep running over the curbs. All I see is people destroying their rims, and those are expensive.
Mike is worried people will avoid the area and find new places to dine. Erica Reddick is active in her local neighborhood planning assembly and is challenging city leaders about the intersection.
It's just stupid. You can't have done that, stepped back, seen people hitting things, and thought, wow, this is a really good idea.
3 weeks ago, I met with city engineer Norman Baldwin to discuss driver concerns. He defended the design.
They need to enter with some higher measure of caution than they're used to and settle into how it's designed. We are committed to the concept that pedestrians are the primary interest to be served here.
Mayor Merle Weinberger agrees with his city engineer, but couldn't tell me if the intersection was dangerous.
How unsafe was that for pedestrians? Because I'm not seeing any. I'm trying to pull reports.
Pedestrian accidents in the city every year.
But at that intersection?
And everything we can do.
I asked Burlington PD for statistics. They tell me there have been no pedestrian-involved accidents there in at least the last 3 years. And sometime in the last 3 weeks, since I interviewed the city engineer, the city decided to review the plan.
There's concern that there might be something not quite right about it. There may be a need for an adjustment with it.
Well, because of the possible adjustment, the mayor says they've stopped pouring concrete into these bump outs. Now, if you want to take part in the discussion, mark your calendar for September 17th. It'll be addressed at the next City Council meeting for the Transportation, Energy, and Utilities Committee sometime between 5 and 7:30 p.m. Now, I asked the mayor how much a rip and redo would cost for this intersection, and at this point, he says he does not know. But we will be at that meeting to get some answers for you. In the meantime, we want your feedback. What do you think about this intersection? Email us at news@wcax.com or message me on social media.
What inspired you to do this? What drove you to the story?
My drive to work. It's my commute every day. So I started to realize there were backups. I started to realize there was gridlock because buses couldn't get through. And then I would actually watch people hit the curbs with their car. So I don't know about you, but I carry a GoPro in my car every day.
Only Celine McArthur
So every day for weeks I started recording it, and this was a regular thing. And then one day I got out, I started talking to people, and across the board, drivers were very unhappy and they wanted some answers.
Now, you spoke with the city engineer about this, and he said that this is the new norm in Burlington.
Yes, which, you know, his thing is every project that they're working on in this Great Streets initiative is pedestrian focused. Here's what he had to say.
A lot of the public right-of-way was used to service traffic at the expense of all those other modes, whether it be walking, biking. I'm sure that it's going to be a little challenging for people to adapt, but I think in the end it'll produce what we're looking for.
Now, that was 3 weeks ago, that conversation. You also spoke with Mayor Murrow Weinberger about this, and what did he have to say?
Well, he said that they're actually now reviewing the project, which makes us wonder, why would you do this in the 11th hour? Was it a design flaw? Was it a construction error? Or did they just realize with enough negative feedback that they needed to review it? So I spoke with him yesterday. Take a listen.
I've had complaints about it. We have had some incidents where people have hit the curb, and there's a bunch of analysis and engineering work going on to review that and to see whether there was an error made.
Now, you also reached out to him today for a follow-up. What was the response there?
Well, we asked him actually to come in because we've had so many of you emailing us and calling us and posting messages on social media, so we invited him to come, and they declined our invitation.
Okay, well, let's take a look at some of those responses. Sienna Fontaine says, I busted my wheel open and damaged my rim at the new bump out. And Celine, she told you that cost her $167 just for the tire, right?
And what really stood out is she's upset because she says she reached out to the city twice, and so far no response, so we are going to check in with the city. And also Stephen Chardelli says the mayor's response that people will grow to love the intersection and think it's one of the best in the city, quote, ignores the reality that users will grade the whole project by the major safety issue and inconvenience caused by the bump outs, not how nice it looks.
All right, we've got Karen Fontaine here. She says that she walks the neighborhood regularly and says, I've never seen anything close to a pedestrian accident. Maybe the mayor should stop trying to ban cars and make the city friendly to all. Can't wait until he's up for re-election.
This will be addressed at the next City Council meeting for the Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee.
And you plan to be there, right, Celine?
Oh, absolutely. We have a lot of questions that need to get answered.
In the meantime, continue to send us your feedback. News at WCAX.com. Celine, good to see you here at 5:30.
Always.
Celine McArthur is live downtown where the meeting is about to begin. Celine, you've got some more questions for city leaders, don't you?
I do, Darren, and I followed up with the mayor's office with some of those questions, and the staff sent me back a link to the Great Streets website. Now, when you print it out so you can actually review it, you can see this is not a light read. In fact, it, drove a little more questions than answers. So I reached out to 2 independent engineers to help get their take on it and help get you ready for tonight's meeting.
It's the intersection many of you are talking about, calling it confusing, chaotic, costly to drivers, and
it's just stupid.
Locals aren't going to come here, and our tourists are going to tear the out of damn sidewalks. And you can quote me on that one.
They're just basically telling motorists to stay home and leave your cars at home and don't go to Burlington.
Burlington's engineer says drivers have to
enter with some higher measure of caution than they're used to and settle into how it's designed.
Or do they? The mayor admits the design may be flawed.
We haven't poured the sidewalks on the south end of it because there is a chance that this review is going to result in saying we need to widen that there. We need to pull it back.
Can you hold this to the inside of the curb?
Kirk Jones has a master's degree in civil and environmental engineering from UVM. He doesn't work for the city and didn't work on the project.
It's about 21.5 feet.
But reviewed the city plan and sees some potential issues with the turns.
There's not enough margin of error. We have parents that have never driven that intersection before. We've got tourists who've never driven that intersection before. We're not just talking about people that's their commute.
After driving the route and watching drivers navigate it, the issues become even more apparent.
The bus driver just stopped and said, this is a nightmare. So it's obvious that it's not simple to navigate. What difference would it make if we came back 3 feet? Or even 5 feet? Is that safer?
I got a second outside opinion on the intersection, a project engineer from Indianapolis, Indiana, to objectively look at the Burlington plan. Gary Duncan says bump outs have benefits, including calming traffic and shortening the crossing distance for walkers, but says, quote, What I cannot evaluate is the actual need for traffic calming at this intersection. A few things that I can think of to be evaluated would be volume of traffic, the free flow speed on the approaches to the intersection, and the number of pedestrians crossing. If this is already a multi-way stop condition, I would not expect a need to slow traffic down, as they are already required to come to a stop.
And what aspect of the city is wanting it versus what aspect of the city needs it?
Jones agrees. He says there's now a bigger issue.
Is it safe? Did they feel safe going through the intersection, as well as bikers, as well as walkers, emergency drivers, transit drivers, is this intersection safe for them?
For this mailman who doesn't want us to use his name, this intersection is a mess. He's worried things won't get better.
We've gone beyond the point of no return there.
Well, we will see if that's the case. The meeting is set to start at 5:30, and people are already showing up to voice their concerns and hear what the city has to say about it. But as of right now, the doors are still locked. So as soon as I can get inside, I will bring you with me.
What has happened in the meeting that's happening tonight so far?
Well, Darren and Kat, the meeting really just got started. The city just started talking about their plan, so I'm going to step aside so you can take a look. Now, for the last half an hour, the city was in its listening phase. So it was listening to about a dozen or so residents who came in to talk about their complaints about the intersection.
Have taken the public feedback and our engineer assessment of the intersection at St. Paul and Maple Street warrants a minor adjustment.
New at 11, a Channel 3 News investigation gets results. The city of Burlington just agreed to make changes to its Great Streets construction project many of you have been upset by.
And the Department of Public Works says crews will begin the rip and redo as early as tomorrow. Let's show some of those changes.
Now, this is a view of the intersection at Maple and St. Paul Streets from the SkyMax 3 drone. Now, tonight, engineers announced they will shrink these bump outs on the southern side of the intersection to give you more room to make the turns.
Now, they will also cut into the granite curbs at a 45-degree angle to make them less sharp, basically ramping the curbs so you don't damage your tires.
So widening it 8 feet, 4 on each side.
Now, Celine, you were there for this meeting tonight. Despite some of these changes Public Works is talking about, it's still defending this project.
Yes, they're calling it a minor adjustment. And despite what they said in our earlier reports, they now say changes were expected.
It's very hard to measure success and failure in this process. And the only way sometimes you can do that is to try things, to experience things, and to hear people's comments.
The biggest surprise was the response to a question from a Burlingtonian. She watched our special, our drone video, our GoPro video, our interviews with people living and driving in the area, and asked why the city didn't do that kind of investigation before breaking ground. Engineer Norman Baldwin said tonight they relied on a computer program.
So what is on paper is different than what is built. And I think that's the challenge.
This so-called minor modification will cost at least $20,000. What the city could not answer tonight, though, is how much this intersection cost to begin with.
Now, Public Works Director Chapin Spencer says the $4.9 million Great Streets Initiative wasn't broken down by each intersection. Now, people who showed up tonight, they were not happy to hear that. Nearly everyone there asked the same question. What did the city learn from this debate?
Tonight, Burlington's fire chief is reacting to some of the changes proposed at that intersection we've been talking about all week at the city's Great Streets Initiative. And he's also weighing in about if those changes could make the intersection any safer.
Now, his response shed some light on why maybe many of you and the city are not on the same page about how well it's working. Well, it turns out there may be a critical lack in strategic communication.
Personally, I was not part of the process where we saw the finalized plans, and perhaps that I think both Public Works and all parties will do that in the future.
Now, Celine, you talked to Mayor Murrah Weinberger about this earlier, and you got kind of a different response.
I did. I talked to him about a week before last night's meeting where the decision was made. Today, I reached out to the mayor's office and got zero response. Last week, he said the fire department was involved in this process.
You know, the fire department has been part of the planning here and the sign-off.
Well, Public Works Director Chapin Spencer says his team will meet with the designer and contractors tomorrow to discuss what they're doing and when, and I will follow up with them to get the specifics. Crews are now deconstructing part of Burlington's Great Streets project. Now, this is the southwest corner of the intersection of Maple and St. Paul Streets. The granite curbs are ripped up, and as soon as crews finish this underground work, they will rebuild the curb. Now, these large trucks and trailers will now have more space to make turns, and the road approaching the intersection will be widened by a total of 8 feet.